already a cat hair in my tea. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to do a currently reading and recently reads video. So I want to talk about one book that I just finished while it's still fresh on my mind, and then I'll talk to you about the books that I am in the middle of, one of which I'm like 2 chapters from the end, so there's that. So the first one is this cute little Europa edition. This is The Clash of Civilizations over an elevator in Piazza Vittorio. Probably pronounced that wrong. This is translated from the Italian by Anne Goldstein, and this is such a fascinating book. So I picked it up in my local used bookstore. They suddenly had all of these different translated books, so a lot of Europa editions, a lot of the NYRB books, which are also translated books, and I was just really excited. So I picked this one up, and basically the premise of this is a man is murdered in an elevator in this apartment building, and this police officer is going around and interviewing a bunch of the residents and getting their story. Meanwhile, they think one guy did it, or the police think one guy did it because he's missing. So he's nowhere to be found. So they assume because he went missing the day that the murder happened that it must have been him. So what is so fascinating about this book is that each of the accounts from a neighbor are called like so-and-so's truth. So it's really highlighting the fact that what you think of as truth may not actually be the truth, because there's things like this one lady who I believe she's the concierge. She doesn't care for a number of the residents because they're immigrants, but she doesn't even bother to understand what country they immigrated from, because she keeps telling this one guy that he's from one country when he's from Iran, and she doesn't understand the cultural implications of telling him, of basically saying like, you're from this country, when he may have a reason why he doesn't want to be known as being from that country. So it may not just be a, you know, he's proud of where he came from. It may be that there's something in the past of that country that she doesn't understand. And it's the same with the guy who owns one of the stores. They continue to call him, I think Bangladeshi or something like that, but he's from a different country. And he has, when he was young, his country was at war with Bangladesh, and what some of the soldiers did, and so he has, you know, an understanding of that country that's different from somebody else's understanding of that country. And so it just, there's so many layers in here about just how we assume so many things about the people around us, and our assumptions are very hurtful. They throw roadblocks into our understanding of other people, and just it was so fascinating. Like the one guy who's missing from all of it, you get his voice because along with the truths, you also have these little places that are like third whale, first whale, second whale, third whale, that kind of thing, where he's basically talking to a tape recorder at night. And the one after that, so when one person tells their story, then the whale after that has to do with his interactions with that person, or with things that were talked about in that story. And it was just super interesting, and the ending was definitely a twist. I didn't expect the ending, and it was very interesting. One of the things that I thought was most interesting about this, that really spoke to, I feel like, the way our society is right now in America. So one of the neighbors is talking about, so she's really anti-immigrant, and she's just over and over again basically saying like, dogs are more important than immigrants. Like, dogs should have more rights than immigrants, is basically what she's saying throughout her entire truth, which is offensive to start with. But then my favorite part of hers is that so her dog gets stolen, and she ends her truth by saying, if Valentino isn't back safe and sound in the next few days, I'm not paying taxes anymore. In fact, I'm going to immigrate to Switzerland as soon as I can and never come back to Italy. So while she's sitting here talking about how immigrants don't deserve rights, that dogs should be treated better than immigrants, she then proceeds to say that if she can't find her dog, she's going to become an immigrant in another country where I bet she expects to be treated like a human. So it's just a really fascinating book, and I would definitely encourage anybody who's interested in immigrant relations, or really just to understand, just to have an understanding about how your perspective and someone else's perspective are not the same, and how the things that you think somebody else should know, they don't necessarily know, and how that can damage your communication. So yeah, this was just like a very jam-packed book for how tiny it was. So I really enjoyed this. Okay, future Jenny here. It's been like a week and a half since I filmed the first part of this video, and since then I have actually finished 2 of the books I was currently reading at that time, and then I've moved on to other things. So I'm just gonna splice these 2 together because I really like the things that I had to say about the first book, and I want to make sure I leave that in, but I also want to talk about my actual feelings about the other 2 books that I read. So the second one that I was reading, that at that point I was 2 chapters from the end, was Uprooted by Naomi Novik, which I know is such a booktube darling, and people love this book. I didn't really love this book. It had things about it that I liked, but overall, I don't know. I guess let me just talk a little bit about kind of what I did like about it. So the first half of this book, or first quarter of this book, was super interesting. So you get the character development, the world building, you kind of get to know how this dragon and his tower and this tradition of taking one girl every 10 years, how it has impacted their village, and how it has impacted how they raise daughters born in dragon years. And you get to know the main character really well, and then you get to know kind of the tower situation and what goes on there, and you see just a really great picture of her character. And I really loved the interactions between her and the dragon. So all of that was fantastic, and I was like, oh my gosh, I know why people love this. This is totally gonna be a 5-star book for me. And then a thing happens, and Agnieszka spends the middle 50% of this book in a completely different environment with completely different characters that personally I found to be kind of irritating and underdeveloped. And so we went from this really great folksy world into this, what felt like, from the moment that the thing that happened that kind of changed everything happens, from that point through about 75% of the book is just like one long battle scene after another. So like there are little things in there that try to add to her character. There are little things that try to build the world and make you understand it. But overall, it was just like, even when she would try to go to sleep, it was like I had just nodded off to sleep when bam, something else was happening. And it was like, this person cannot go like a month without a solid night's sleep. And it was just, it was crazy. So that part of it was irritating. And then like that continued on up until about maybe 3 chapters from the end of the book, or 2 chapters from the end of the book. And then we get this really beautiful ending that I thought was really well done, really just back to that folksy, character driven you know, rich world that I was expecting in the first quarter of the book. So had it continued on that path that it ultimately ended on, I would have been, I think, much more interested and much more kind of enthralled by the world. But it was just like that entire middle part was just frustrating and exhausting and just sort of not all that interesting to me. So that's kind of where I stand on this. I think I ended up giving it like 3.5 stars or something like that. The ending really kind of won me back over to it being like a book I enjoyed, from it being something that I would just be like, no, just pass. So I can see why people love this, but it just wasn't for me. And then the second one, talk about one long battle scene after another. I finished this book, so The Decision at Thunder Rift, which is a Battletech book. If you guys don't know, 3 of my Bookopoly cards in my Bookopoly year-long project are my husband's choice. So he gets to pick 3 books. He's picked 2 so far, this one and an Arthur C. Clarke book. And I knew for like 2 months before that this was going to be the book. So it's like a genre science fiction. It revolves around the BattleMech universe, or the Battletech universe, which is like these giant humanoid, for the most part, robots that fight battles. Like, that's the whole thing. So the fact that it was basically one long battle scene for the entire book is not surprising, but it was exhausting. The character development was okay. Like, we get a semi-decent picture of the one main character. Everyone else is just sort of there. Like, there's a girl in there that I guess is gonna be part of the larger picture because this is part of a trilogy. But she was two-dimensional. And yeah, it just was one of those things where it was like, I could see where he's going, but it just didn't have any real world building or character development. Like, the world building was really just info dumps. So it was like lists of things and just like long chapters that were about the weather. So instead of like kind of piecing that in as the book went in a nicely paced way, you would just get whole chapters of just info dumping, which was exhausting. I will be honest, but at the end of this, I was sort of skim reading. It was all right. Like, I gave it 3 stars, I think. I think I may end up having to read the other 2 because my husband's really excited for me to do that, but I will say at this point in time, I'm not super looking forward to doing that. And then I am in the middle of 2 books at this point. The first one being Gin City. This is a book that I have had for so long. I was highly anticipating, and I'm so glad to finally be getting to it. I am about 100 pages in, and basically this is a story about a boy named Endelbad who finds out when his father goes into kind of like a magic-induced coma, and at that point he finds out that Jinn are real and that he's in fact half Jinn. So he is kind of like embarking on this whole learning about this. We're learning about the world of the Jinn, the politics. So it's very heavy into the politics of Jinn-human relations. Well, my battery died, so there's that. But basically, this is just shaping up to be a really interesting kind of political focused novel about Jinn and humans, and it's set in the Middle East, and I'm very excited to get further into this because I have been highly anticipating this for about a year now. And then the last book that I am currently reading is Robinson Crusoe, or Crusoe. I always say Caruso, but I think it's Crusoe. This is a book that I picked up from Book Depository because of this gorgeous Penguin English Library Edition. And I tried at one point to read the physical book and was not hugely a fan of it because it's really dense. It's another book where there's just like a crazy amount of info dumping and lists. But I found the audiobook and I really wanted to read it because I picked up this book, which is called Crusoe's Daughter. And this sounds super interesting, but I didn't want to read this without reading the original. So I've been listening to the audiobook of this, and the audiobook's actually been pretty good. I will say that, like I said, very list and info dumpy heavy. At one point he told like a story about an entire year, and he was like, and I kept a journal, so we'll take a look at that journal, and then rehash the entire like year or 2 years of journal entries. So that was a little bit tedious, but I do find it really interesting because it's like the whole survivalist thing. So being stranded on a desert island. So if you don't know what this is about, basically it's about a man who gets stranded on a desert island alone for 27 years, and so this is about his experience there. So it's basically just all of these incredible things that he like thinks of to do, and how he manages to make a life and a home and thrive and live on this island for 27 years. And then it's also about kind of his fears and reactions to what he deems savages. So basically the natives from the South American region, and he has no idea where he is. He doesn't know, you know, how they treat outsiders, that kind of thing. So it's really interesting in that aspect. It's just very dense, and the book, like the physical book, does not seem to have chapter breaks, even though in the audiobook he does say chapter numbers at some point. So I don't really know where that disconnect is, but I am tentatively enjoying this. I think that it will make me enjoy this and understand this much more. This is basically about a girl who is living close to the Irish Sea, and she is really enamored with the novel Robinson Crusoe, and how that kind of plays into her daily life and her thoughts and things like that. So I'm really interested to read this, and as soon as I finish this or Gin City, I'm gonna pick this one up so that I can read it very soon after this. I love doing that. I have a couple of different things that I do book pairs, so I'll probably have a video coming up pretty soon about pairing books together, like reading experiences from pairing books together. But yes, that is basically what I'm reading and what's upcoming in my reading. While you are watching this, I will be in New York, and I'm very excited about that, or just come back from New York, on my way back from New York. I'm not sure when I'm going to be posting this, but I will have very soon for you my third quarter book haul, which this will be a part of, so spoilers on that. And I'm anticipating it's probably going to be pretty ugly, because September is just a free-for-all month for me, and I am looking forward to picking up some things in New York and visiting as many bookstores as possible. So yeah, if you have any recommendations, I will be checking my email, so if I'm still in New York when this goes live, then I'll check those recommendations out. Anyways, I hope you guys are having a wonderful week, and I will see you next time. Bye!